Welcome to the Somatic Movement Summit, a free online event where you'll learn from leading experts how to embody all of yourself through the medicine of movement. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Brian Siddhartha Engel.
Welcome, everybody. I'm with Lavinia Plonka. She is a Guild-certified Feldenkrais practitioner. Lavinia has been teaching people how to move better and feel better for over 25 years, combining her theater background, her research in the emotional links to our physical attributes and her passion for self-study. Lavinia teaches internationally as well as directing the Asheville Movement Center in North Carolina. Welcome, Lavinia. Pleasure to have you here with us. And how are you doing today?
Thank you, Brian. It's wonderful to be here, and I feel great.
Wonderful. Well, the first question I'd like to ask you, Lavinia, is what is the difference between the Feldenkrais method and other somatic approaches like yoga and Tai Chi?
Well, of course, all of them in one way or another ask us to bring a quality of mindfulness to our approach, instead of just doing something by rote or mechanically. One of the big differences between those two and the Feldenkrais method is that both of them in terms of, well, for yoga, in terms of hatha yoga, because I know there are many other forms of yoga, and the Tai Chi movements are both related to a kind of form. You learn a form, whether it's learning the asanas and working with the postures and then finding, of course, your own relationship to them. And with Tai Chi, whether you're exploring one of the many different forms, there is a process of learning them and then developing your own evolution through the process of these forms or postures. Where in the Feldenkrais method, we look at movement sort of for the sake of movement. There's no form to learn. There's no series of things that one memorizes in the process of learning a Feldenkrais lesson. And while there are different sequences that can become familiar to people after a while, they're always combined in very unique ways. So that's one of the big differences. And then there's ways that all of these disciplines are related. Now, one of the big differences in Feldenkrais is that many of the lessons are done lying down. And the reason we use lying down, it's funny, Moshe Feldenkrais used to say that lying down is just like standing up, except that you're not fighting gravity. And so we use the advantage of lying down to take some of the stress of our anti-gravity muscles, some of the tension we used to hold ourselves up that we don't realize we even have, by using lying down first to release that anti-gravity tension to begin to work. The other thing that happens when you're lying down, of course, is that you're not looking at other people. And this is another one of the big differences between many of the somatic approaches and the Feldenkrais method, in that we don't demonstrate how you should do a movement or how a movement should look. The teacher does not show anything. What we do in what we call awareness through movement lessons is we guide people verbally. So they're lying down. They often have their eyes closed unless there's something specific that we're doing with the eyes. And they're taking in the instructions and the guidance through an auditory experience and interpreting that according to their abilities, their understanding, their interest even. And then the Feldenkrais teacher acts as a facilitator. So we watch what's going on, and if we see that there's someone that has really taken the instructions in a direction that maybe is not so useful for them, we start to offer suggestions, possibilities, other strategies in assuming that this person will hear us in a different way. So it's very rare that we actually come over and correct someone. Even if we do go over to the person individually, we will again offer a suggestion because that person may have a very good reason for not moving their shoulder. They might be not moving their shoulder because they have an injury. So we respect that. So each person is working according to what they can do in an awareness through movement class. And then when we work with people privately, which again is a different approach than yoga and Tai Chi, but has some relationship to things like the Alexander technique and somatics and other things that we could talk about, we guide the person again, but this time through a combination of voice and touch. Not touch like massage, but literally guiding their movement through their range, their possibility to start to see how we can uncover strategies for helping them move better, feel better, and get what they want. The other big difference, I think, amongst at least our approach, is that we're always looking at how the movements that we're doing can improve our thinking and our sensing and our feeling. And I know that you can do that with all the other disciplines, but our emphasis is always on finding a strategy, exploring a problem, looking at what I want for myself and how I can understand myself through that process. Sometimes people have said that our work is like a somatic approach to Socratic thinking. So I've just gone on and on. I'm sure that you have a few other questions, but there's a lot more to it.
Thank you, Lavinia. So just to reiterate, there's two parts to the Feldenkrais method. One where there's group lessons where people are sort of rolling around on the floor with their eyes shut and they're not copying anybody. And the whole strategy is, the whole thinking behind it is for them to learn in their own way, in their own time. And you're offering an environment and strategies for them to learn. And the second part is done on a table where the same principle is involved or strategy is involved. There's a conversation between your hands and the person's, say, nervous system. So again, you're sort of giving some input, they're learning and reorganizing themselves. And then on top of that, because some movement is so primary, when movement sort of changes for the better and better functional ways, the thinking changes of your student or client. And with thinking change, maybe their action changes and they reach more of their potential. Does that sum it up a little bit in what you were saying?
Oh, yeah, that was beautiful. I especially loved that you said we roll around on the floor. That's another big difference, I think, between some of the other somatic approaches that we've talked about, is that we explore different approaches to movement based on infant development, based on animal movement taken from the martial arts. And then actually Feldenkrais also developed awareness through movement lessons that were based on different yoga asanas and different Tai Chi principles. By breaking it down into small, discrete packets of movement, we can begin to start to understand how we move. The other thing I wanted to add to what you said so eloquently was that we don't think of functional integration, which is the way we work with people one-on-one, and awareness through movement as two distinct things. They're really two sides of the same coin. And one can learn through the hands-on and then apply it in an awareness through movement lesson and vice versa. So we've never thought of it as two separate things. Also because each person has their own distinct learning style and way of taking things in. And we know this, knowing about different ways that people learn. But some people really like a group setting. Some people learn better through auditory experience. Some people really need to be taken care of through touch and guided movement. And so what we're doing is we're offering people many different options for learning. And again, it's not about just movement. As Feldenkrais said, I don't teach movement, I teach learning. So what we're actually doing is looking at a new way to learn.
Wonderful. And obviously there's many benefits from both the group lessons and the table work. And a lot of people come because they're in pain. But also there's something that I know that you're interested in, and that is vitality and resilience that happens through awareness, through movement Could you explain to us what you mean by resilience and how does ATM help us with resilience and vitality?
So, Moshe Feldenkrais once defined health as the ability to recover from shock. And even in one of the quotes, he said how much time it takes for us to recover from shock. So when you think about, some of the new definitions of resilience from the perspective of the contemporary medicine, they're talking about resilience as the ability to recover from adverse conditions. So I think of shock as an adverse condition, and I think that those two kind of come together. So there's so many different ways that we can look at resilience through the perspective of movement. One of my favorites, of course, and this very much has to do with a lot of the population that is interested in the Feldenkrais method, is, of course, people who at one point in their lives maybe were very, very physically fit, athletes, dancers, but are now finding the little aches and pains and different interferences that are causing them to limit their movement, limit their pleasure in movement, and also giving them a lot of fear of falling, fear of injury, or we have pain already that creates different limitations. So when I think of resilience from the Feldenkrais perspective, again, we're down on the floor, we're, as you said, rolling around, but we're also exploring all these different nuances of how we can move better, how I can begin to use myself in a more intelligent fashion, how I can begin to rally even the fulcrum or the lever effects of how I use myself. When young people don't have to think about how to get up out of a chair, for example, they just kind of pop up because they've got all of these twitchy muscles that are still working great. As we age, we need to start moving more sensibly, using ourselves in a different way. And so that's one aspect of resilience that I think is really important. Now, that being said, there are a lot of people who are very high functioning athletes, dancers, who also have a tendency, musicians, to injure themselves through overwork, through strain, through a competitive atmosphere. And we can work with them also to teach them how to use themselves in a way that can prevent that injury and help them recover more quickly. And it's all done through these very delicate, small, discrete movements that help us understand ourselves better. I hope I answered that.
Absolutely. So I hear there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of movement, but a big part of the human experience is emotion. And a big emotion that's going on right now in the world is fear. So I often think about awareness through movement as a sort of like a movement through meditation, where because you're paying so much attention to your internal processes on a bodily level, that the mind actually becomes quiet, because mind body, pretty much the same thing. That's the somatic definition. So from your perspective in relation to emotions and movement, and maybe bringing in the fear factor too, in terms of how that may help the current climate that we're in.
So first of all, one of the things that we speak about all the time is that there are always 4 things going on in the human experience, or what Moshe Feldenkrais called the 4 components of action. So there's thinking, there's the emotions or feeling, there's sensing, which I'll talk about more, and of course there's movement itself. And these 4 things are going on all the time, every moment of your life. In fact, we say sometimes movement is life, and without movement, life is unthinkable. So, but if movement is life, then all of my life, my thinking life, my feeling life, are contained within this process of moving. And, I often say to people, how you move is how you move through life. So if I'm carrying fear, or as Feldenkrais called it, an anxiety pattern, which is a way that I use my posture that contributes to my fear as well as communicates my fear, and I'm not aware of it, I can't begin to start to feel comfortable in my own skin. So when we talk about something like the fear that a lot of people are living in right now, I find that that is a wonderful thing to begin to address through movement. I've been talking to a lot of my friends, some of whom do mindfulness practices or affirmations, and they have said that, just repeating over and over again that I am well, it all will be well, is not helping them. But what we can begin to recognize is, well, what is my breath pattern right now? How do I hold my shoulders? Where is my neck? And how can those kind of things contribute to the sense of fear I have? Any emotion that in the entire lexicon of emotions has its own breath pattern, its own facial expression, its own postural relationship. And that comes from, the nervous system talking to these parts of ourselves. I don't want to get too anatomical in things, but, your vagus nerve, for example, touches every organ in your body and then connects up to your brain to start giving information about how I am, how I express myself. Your seventh cranial nerve is connected to every muscle of facial expression in your face. And again, that comes from the neck and the brainstem. So as these nerves communicate with each other, they affect our muscles. So a person who's walking around with shoulders up by their ears or their eyes slightly wide, or has even a slightly too high in the chest breathing pattern, all of these little tiny things that maybe would be unnoticeable in your average day can contribute to what I consider to be a low level of fear or anxiety. So when we do Feldenkrais lessons, we can begin to start to sense, what is my breathing like? Where am I holding? What exactly is happening in my eyes? Can my eyes relax? What's the connection of my eyes to my neck? All of these kind of questions come up as we're lying on the floor and bringing our attention to these different areas of ourselves. And so that's one way that I really feel that our work can be very helpful during this challenging time. There are many, many ways that one could tune into calming the nervous system, for example, through small movements. I mean, I could show you a couple right now. I know that we were planning to do something at the end, but I don't know if you want to explore that at all.
Sure, we can explore that. Go ahead.
Well, there's a couple of things. There's one that I really, really love for anxiety or any feeling that things are getting out of control. And it's a movement that Feldenkrais called the bell hand. And there's a lot of different people who have different theories about why it's called the bell hand, but it's a very delicate movement, and people can try it right now if they want to. You can have your hand resting, your elbow resting on your chair or your desk or whatever, or you could even have an arm resting in your other hand, in the palm of your hand, the way I'm showing it here, just so that it's supported. You might want to start with your dominant arm, although it doesn't really matter what you start with. It's just that I always find that my dominant arm is a little bit more talented when I start these things. And you're very simply going to bring the tips of your fingers together to touch your thumb. So you're not squeezing, you're not trying to press or anything like that. It's almost as if you were a flower that blossomed and then you're coming back into your bud form. And then the minute that you touch the thumb with the rest of the fingers, you allow the hand to open again. And you begin to explore this pulsing movement. And every person is going to have their own tempo, their own rhythm. But the idea is that it moves in a slow and relaxed fashion. And as you're doing this rhythm, this easy pulsing rhythm, at the same time, you begin to start to sense your own breath. And you don't try to make your breath match the pulsing of the hand. In fact, you start to notice, wow, I have all these different rhythms in me. I've got this pulse in my hand. I've got the rhythm of my breath. I've got my heartbeat. So now we're going into the sophistication of our sensory apparatus, right? Because I have my proprioceptive sense, how my fingers come together and touch my hand. And I've got my interoceptive sense, sensing my heartbeat and my breath as I do this movement. And what is really interesting about this movement is that if I start to feel anxious, or my breath pattern starts to change, or my anxiety level grows, it starts to get reflected in my hand. I can feel myself right now because I'm talking and I'm trying to communicate. I can feel my hand wanting to speed up, for example. So sometimes you can check that your hand has sped up, or your hand got stuck shut and you're like all of a sudden in anxious thoughts. And so what it does is it begins to start to allow you to calm your system, and closing the eyes is actually a wonderful way to get in touch with that. And sometimes you can even begin to move your arm around, like if you wanted to say, okay, I'm going to calm my face down now. You just let that pulsing happen in front of your face for a few moments. And then you begin to realize, oh, like for example, I just took a deep sigh. And what was that sigh about? I don't want to analyze it, but just recognizing that I needed to let go of something. And you only do it for a few moments and then you let it go. But that's an example of a way that I can calm myself through a somatic approach. And there are quite a few of them, and people can go to just about any Feldenkrais class or Feldenkrais teacher and learn about these different strategies.
Yeah, I think that's quite an authentic way to make our mind become more calm and more relaxed by using this very, very gentle movements. So what you're suggesting is that we come out of this sympathetic fight and flight and freeze response and go more into the parasympathetic response of rest and health and learning. And from that place, we can sort of learn to balance the sympathetic fight and flight with parasympathetic, the rest of the learning. And we have the ability to go from one when needed and back to the other, and not sort of hanging out in this continual sort of low grade stressful state in this sympathetic tone. Would that be correct in saying that, Lavinia?
Yeah, and I think that that's an important thing for people to remember, is that when, just to clarify, the sympathetic nervous system is governing our fight or flight. And even if I'm in a low grade state of anxiety, that means that the sympathetic nervous system is not allowing the parasympathetic response to even kind of take place in us. So that means that there's going to be a buildup to a level of exhaustion or immune suppression, because your parasympathetic nervous system governs not just rest and learning, but also healing. And so, sometimes people are in such a state of stress and anxiety that even when they're sleeping, which should be triggering the parasympathetic response, they're still sleeping in this position. So doing some movement even before bed can allow you to move towards this more parasympathetic reaction in yourself. We feel a lot of times that because of the lessons, so many of the lessons are done lying down and with the eyes closed, that we're helping bring that parasympathetic response on, allowing for greater learning. And what you said, which I thought was so brilliant, was that I can have a choice. When I need to go into sympathetic, I need to get the job done, I need to run somewhere, I can choose that. But then I also have the choice to come back to a place of healing and learning and rest.
And of course, another point there would be, before even they start doing any sort of micro movements, that they have to feel that safety. And that's one other thing I like about the Feldenkrais method, both the table work and the floor work, is that we really spend that time just scanning our system. How do I feel? Am I comfortable? Am I safe? And on the table, the way you give support, lots of different sort of cushions and blocks and so forth, so they can feel the support of the table. And they feel obviously this resonance with the teacher, like, does this person get me? Does this person understand me? Am I safe with this person? So all those parameters sort of take place so that then that shift can really take place in an authentic way.
Right. The whole idea, both in the private and in the group sessions, is that we stress creating a safe environment for learning. And so, like I said before, one of the important things is that we are creating a non-competitive, non-judgmental atmosphere where a person can make the choices that are right for them, not according to what someone thinks they should do. We speak a lot in our work about moving from compulsion to choice, right? So many of us live in a world of shoulds. Even now, I should be washing my hands. I'd like to wash my hands. There's a completely different feeling in those two experiences, emotionally as well as mentally. So, when we offer that kind of an atmosphere for people where they can actually choose how they do a movement, it does begin to feel safer, and again brings us back to parasympathetic.
So obviously there's a whole lot of benefits there to be got through this work. A lot of people, as I said before, come to it for pain, but some people are interested in posture and so forth like that. And it's been said sometimes that the Feldenkrais method is the homeopathy of body work, meaning instead of trying to go out of a pattern and stretch and go the opposite way, we just mirror what's already there. Supposing we are in this fear response and their shoulders are up and their shoulders are forward, well, we could explore going into that pattern and coming out of that pattern. And then when we do that, our posture changes and our self-image changes, and we become more happy in our somas.
Well, it's interesting. I never thought of it as homeopathic before. I've always thought about it from the perspective of, like Aikido, where in Aikido, you're always trying to help your partner by supporting them in what they're doing. And that's how I've always thought of doing exactly what you described, where if I recognize that I'm in this particular posture and I recognize that my eyes are nervous, that instead of trying to fix it right away, that I bring myself to that awareness and maybe even exaggerate it a little bit. And what that does is if I'm bringing awareness to it, on one level, you could say, oh, well, I'm teaching my nervous system something about the choice that it's making. But from a physiological perspective, of course, we're also looking at the relationship between agonist and antagonist muscles, right? And so if I'm creating this extreme agonist response, there's going to be some part of the musculature that's going to want to kind of kick in and shift that so that when I let go, there's a different kind of organization in myself. So there's two levels to that. One way that a person can just explore that right here is to just pick a shoulder right now. And as you, if you feel any tension, pick the shoulder that feels the most tense, or just be arbitrary and just pick one shoulder up very, very slowly, being aware of how your ribs are participating and how your breath is impacted when you exaggerate this movement of the shoulder, and noticing what's happening to your face and maybe even what's holding on in your lower back. And then very, very slowly lowering that shoulder very slowly so that you are staying with it. Your awareness is staying with it all the way down. And then just noticing how that shoulder now feels in comparison to the other shoulder that you have. And maybe the other shoulder now is actually also feeling an emotion of jealousy or wanting to join in. But that's one way that we use this nervous system to help remind ourselves of what our other possibilities are.
Yes, I mean, there's no doubt that the Feldenkrais method is very profound and very effective. And for for a lot of the awareness through movement lessons, it seems like very, very simple movements, which a lot of them are. But the hard thing that people find it hard to do is to apply the learning strategies, which is really slowing it down, not going beyond their limits, really finding the comfort in the work, really finding how when something moves, how that affects other things and the whole system works as one unit. So the mastery in the work is to master the strategies, because the movements itself, I mean, because what you described there with lifting the shoulder, it's such a simple thing to do. But when you ask people to do that, can they be aware of that? Can they respect their limits? Can they move slowly? So when I get people to do this, I actually get them to repeat the strategies 3 or 4 times, because it just goes one ear and out the other before I start with them. Have you anything to say about that?
Oh, I have a lot of things to say about that. One of the first things is that, we begin from where we are. So many people have never been introduced to the idea that we can listen to ourselves, or that my posture affects my emotions, or that the way I carry this is all very new information for many people. They might have an intuition, or they have a friend who told them they felt a lot better after Feldenkrais, but they don't really know how to pay attention in the way that you're describing. And I can say that when I first discovered the Feldenkrais method, I discovered it in a book. This was before the internet existed. And I didn't know that there were any teachers anywhere around. And it was one of his books that had exercises written in it. And I was a dancer and a mime, so I was used to working it and really getting in there and doing it. And so I read the instruction, and he said, cross your legs and let them drop to the floor 25 times. So I crossed my legs and I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 25 times. And I felt better. I felt better, even though later on, when I went to a class and found out that I was supposed to sense my breath and move slowly and be inward and all that, and discovered that I had, quote unquote, been doing it all wrong, I had still gotten a benefit from it, because there was a curiosity on my part. There was a desire, and I was lying down, which I never did. I do now. So I think that each person, when they come to a class, has an opportunity to, like I said, start from where they are, and they will learn something. It's the responsibility of the teacher to be able to guide people to become interested, to become curious, to explore in those different ways. But each one of us has an experience that's unique. And what I was thinking about also as you were speaking was of this, law and statistics that I know that you know it, called the Weber Fechner Law, or Effect. And that's where, the more sensitive the instrument, the greater the distinctions of differences are felt. So, Feldenkrais once described it: if you were carrying a piano on your back and somebody dropped a feather on it, you wouldn't feel it. But if you were holding your finger out and somebody dropped a feather on it, you would sense it. And so the level of our sensitivity is different at different points in our lives. If you're carrying the burden of fear and injuries and trauma and a knee replacement and a disease into a classroom, you can't be expected to suddenly be able to sense your breath, the nuances, and all those things. So what can I begin to feel? How can I begin to have an experience that makes this feel worthwhile to pursue? That's the part that's really interesting for me, is like we've kind of been, blocked off from sensing our own bodies, from our education, from sitting in desks all the time, from sitting in computers all the time, from running on treadmills while we're watching TV all the time. And so just the fact that someone has walked into my classroom and is willing to lie down and listen to their breath is a huge, big step. So we take it one step at a time. We don't expect people to do it all at once. And as you said, repetition can become absolutely fascinating. If each time I repeat, I'm learning something new about myself.
Yes, and I think during this time where we have a lot of time at home and not going out, for people like you and I who have a background in this for many years, we're sort of a little bit privileged because we can find so much pleasure just from exploring ourselves through movement and find this sort of safety and security and joy and happiness. So all the sort of practices that I've been doing over the years, I feel now it's really, really helping me dealing with these times. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, you know that I'm Irish, and I also know that you have a background in theatre. And I also know that you're a consultant in movement for theatre and for the Irish National Folk Theatre. Could you tell me, what does a movement consultant mean in that context?
Well, I'm not doing that anymore. That was years ago that I did it. If you notice, it's in my biography as my past. But that was a very interesting assignment that I had. There was a company, I believe it was called the Irish National Folk Theatre or Folk Dance Theatre in Tralee. And they were working on a piece, which I'm sure you know as someone Irish. It was a folk tale about these 7 brothers that were turned into swans by their evil stepmother. I'm sure you know this story. And the company was kind of like they were not Riverdance, but they were a company like Riverdance in the sense that they emphasized the dancing that the Irish did with the feet and their hands behind their back all the time. And they were stuck. They were challenged. They wanted to go further, and they wanted to find a way to continue the process of their dance, but to somehow show how these brothers were turned into swans and how they could come back. So they actually hired me. I flew over to Ireland and I worked with them on how to do the movement. I don't know if there's enough room here, but to learn how to do the movement of undulation in the body, working with undulation in the body and how that could shift through into that. And then I used their own dance rhythm of, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, to show them how they could move forward and backwards, so that we created the whole illusion of these people during a dance, moving from human to swan and then back from swan to human. It wasn't, even though I was already practicing as a Feldenkrais teacher, we did a couple of awareness through movement classes just to get them relaxed. And then we went into true mime technique for that. No one's ever asked me about this. I'm so thrilled to be able to share it.
When I saw it in your bio, I thought I've got to ask her about this. And also because, not that I'm a dancer, but I sing, I play guitar, and I used to be a child actor. And I'm very curious about embodiment in relation to acting, because, a good actor is going to embody the character. It can't just be a voice thing, or it gets very heady otherwise. So to get embodied with that character and to move from that place, that really sort of fascinates me. And I noticed that when I'm really doing a lot of great embodied practice, my voice improves, and I'd like to act all the time and just with my friends and joking. And I feel that I've become a better actor the more embodied I am. So I feel that there's a big place for our work in theatre and art and for musicians, especially for singers.
Right. And I mean, I think that for actors, the Feldenkrais method is absolutely essential for the ability to be able to access emotional choices in the moment, right? To actually be able to find, spontaneity in what I do. The difference between spontaneity and compulsion, for example, is key. And an actor is often, how can I put it, not trapped. They kind of fall up against themselves because of the various compulsions that they carry in their habitual postures or their habitual behavior. Where if someone has studied Feldenkrais and learned about all of these different choices that we make, both emotionally and physically, that appears on the stage. That happens on the stage. I felt the transition because I performed for over 25 years professionally. And then I was doing my Feldenkrais training. And then there was a period where I was still performing professionally while I was evolving my Feldenkrais practice. And that period of time when I was still performing, but already understood a lot about Feldenkrais, I felt like that my performances were so much more embodied, present, relaxed, I was more able to connect with the audience in a real way instead of just working from technique and working from my training, that I actually was able to put myself in there. And then over the last 12 years or so, actually it's been 14 years at this point, I've also been studying something called the emotional effector patterns, which were discovered by the scientist Susanna Block. She's from Chile, many years ago, probably in the 60s. But they're actual somatic, I don't want to call them positions, but actually the breathing pattern, facial expression, and posture of the basic emotions, and applying the Feldenkrais method to understanding how we can better access and make choices in these various emotional effector patterns. And this is work that has been done for many years with actors. I now work with somebody and we call it the emotional body, but it's a way of using these emotional effector patterns and the Feldenkrais method in order to make choices in your life better emotionally. And so actors have been using it even to mark their scripts, that I'm doing this pattern and this pattern and this pattern. And it may seem artificial, but it actually is in many ways more embodied than the idea of trying to pull an emotion from a memory or from your head.
Is there any way, Lavinia, you could lead us through some sort of exercise to give us a first-person experience of what you're talking about right now?
You're speaking about the emotion aspect?
Yeah. And combining that with the Feldenkrais method.
Okay. Let me think really quickly. Yes, I can. And what I'd like you to do is just close your eyes and begin to sense your breathing. Noticing the movement of your breath as it comes in through your nose, down through the back of the roof of your mouth, down into your trachea, into your bronchioles, into the lungs, sensing the movement of the diaphragm and how your abdomen might respond. It responds a little differently when we're sitting than when we're lying down, so you may feel more movement in your ribs right now, sensing the movement of your inhale and your exhale. So just start there with sensing your breath. And many Feldenkrais lessons begin with just this connection to the breath. And then could you begin to turn your attention to your face? And just sense for yourself right now what your mouth is doing, whether your eyes feel like they're resting in your head, whether there's any tension in your forehead. And then you're just going to, don't even do this movement yet, but imagine that the outside corners of your mouth are beginning to move outward in the direction of your ears. Just imagine that movement. So you're picturing what it would feel like for the muscles of your face, of your mouth, to move outward. And as you continue sensing that possibility, could you also begin to imagine the outside corners of your eyes moving outward so that your whole face in your imagination can begin to widen? And now notice how, as you did that, as you were concentrating, as you were listening, what you felt in your breath. Did you lose contact with your breath? Did it move up in your chest as you were making an effort? And see if you can bring it down to that relaxed breathing that you had before. And then, in the smallest possible way, begin to allow these two things to happen: for the outside corners of your mouth to move outward and the outside corners of your eyes to move outward. So you could say that what you're doing right now is you're abducting the muscles of your face from the center of yourself, right? We know that abduction is moving away from the center. So when you put your arm out to the side or you kick your leg out to the side, you're abducting. So you're feeling that abduction of your whole face, the whole face widening. And maybe it'll grow into a little bit of a smile. It doesn't have to. It's everyone up to where you feel most comfortable. And then gradually let that go and allow your face to return to its natural composure. And notice your breathing. And now, this is a little more complicated, but I'll try my best to explain it. Could you think about how would you adduct the muscles of your face? In other words, thinking of the muscles of your face coming in towards your nose. So that doesn't mean that you pucker your lips. Instead, allowing everything to just become a little tighter towards the center. So the lips would actually become a little bit thinner. And the muscles across the top of the nose would start to tighten a little bit, and your nostrils might flare just a hair. And your lower eyelids would come a little bit closer in. And just notice what happened to your breath pattern. And we're not going to stay there for very long because you probably are already sensing something different. So let it come back out to your natural face. And just notice what you notice about your face right now. And then simply allow your mouth again and your eyes to move out just a little tiny bit. And then softly open your eyes and just let your head tilt slightly to one side or the other side. Notice your breath. And see if as you're breathing, you can make the breath happen through your nose. Your eyes are open. You have a slight smile. See if you can let your exhale just be one count longer than your inhale, with a little pause at the end. And then come back to your regular face and feel how that's different. So maybe without me saying too much about it, you can speak about what you experienced as you were doing that, Brian.
Sure. So the first bit with the abduction of the eyes and the mouth, I sort of felt like I was a clown, and I felt this happy clown sort of vibe come upon me. And then when the mouth started going to adduction in the eyes, I just felt this anger coming on me. So yeah, I really got that, sort of do this physical, because the face is how we express our emotions. So just to sort of so gently go, so I mean, I doubt very much you could even see what I was doing. It was so small and nuanced, but still this emotion came with it. And then at the end of it, I just felt that my face was just a lot more soft and a lot more neutral than it was at the in the beginning.
Right. So it's just like a little taste. And, Feldenkrais used this action of abduction in many of his lessons in order to, give people a kind of a point of reference of how they're carrying their tension in their face or how the face impacts on the breathing. We could have gone into a whole thing on the breathing as well. And in the emotional body, of course, we're looking at how these different the muscular movements, abduction and adduction, and then also flexion and extension of the whole self contribute to the various emotional patterns. And so that's an example of how it can be combined, but also an example of how powerful every moment is in terms of how you're communicating both to yourself as well as to others, just in becoming aware of your face.
Thank you, Lavinia. And if people want to get in contact with you, could you give us your website or some contact information?
Sure. I mean, my website is simply my name. I was going to say it's really simple. It's just my name, but my name is complicated. So it's LaviniaPlonka.com, LaviniaPlonka.com. And, I do teach online classes and I do work with people online. So in this particular time, that's beginning to become something that's very necessary for people. So anyone who wants to try some Feldenkrais, this is a wonderful time to be able to try it in your own learning environment in the safety of your own home.
Wonderful. And Lavinia, is there any last words you'd like to share with us before you depart?
I suppose the one thing that I was thinking about was this wonderful quote of Feldenkrais's that really attracted me, and that he was saying that when we learn this method, it gives us the ability, or again, he used the word health, is the ability to realize our avowed and our unavowed dreams. In other words, that we can begin to access the intelligence of ourselves to be able to do what we want. If you know what you're doing, you can do what you want.
Lavinia Plonka, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you and listening to you, and I'm sure you'll be benefiting a lot of people out there with your words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining the Somatic Movement Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit SomaticMovementSummit.com. To learn more about our global programs, to support you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this embodied path to vitality and wholeness with your friends and family.